The stars looked different that night. Commander Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of Earth's orbital defense station, watching the black void beyond Mars. His coffee had gone cold an hour ago, but he couldn't bring himself to look away from the sensors. Something was coming. The first sign had been the radio signals, strange patterns that made no sense to anyone on Earth. Dr. Lisa Grant had been working on them for 3 days straight, trying to find meaning in the chaos. The signals were getting stronger, which meant whatever was sending them was getting closer. Jake's communicator buzzed. "Commander, you need to see this," came Lisa's voice, tight with excitement and fear. In the research lab, Lisa pointed at the main screen. The signal had changed. Instead of random noise, it now showed clear mathematical patterns, prime numbers, then the value of pi, then something that looked like a star map. "It's trying to talk to us," Lisa said, her hands shaking as she typed. "This is first contact, Jake. We're not alone." The next morning brought chaos. Every government on Earth was calling at once. President Helen Carter had been in emergency meetings since dawn. The military was on high alert, but no one knew what they were supposed to be alerting against. Admiral Patricia Knox arrived at the space station with orders sealed in red tape. "We wait," she told Jake. "Whatever's coming, we let it come. But we're ready for anything." The ship appeared 3 hours later. It came out of nowhere, materializing near Jupiter like it had always been there. The vessel was beautiful in a way that made humans feel small. It looked like a crystal cathedral, made of light, all curves and flowing lines that hurt to look at directly. "It's huge," whispered radar operator Tom Phillips from his station. 3 miles long, maybe more, but I'm not reading any weapons." The crystal ship moved toward Earth slowly, like it was afraid to come too close. When it reached the moon's orbit, it stopped and waited. The message came in perfect English. "People of Earth, I am Ambassador Cathvar of the Zephyrian Coalition. I come seeking help. My people are dying. Please respond." Jake looked at Admiral Knox. She nodded. "This is Commander Jake Morrison of Earth Defense. We hear you, Ambassador. What kind of help do you need?" There was a long pause. When the alien spoke again, his voice carried centuries of sadness. "May I come aboard your station? What I must show you cannot be sent through signals alone." 2 hours later, Jake watched as the alien shuttle docked with their station. The being that stepped out looked nothing like the monsters from old movies. Cathvar stood 7 feet tall, his body made of what looked like living crystal. Light moved through him in slow patterns, and when he spoke, his voice came from everywhere at once. "Thank you for seeing me," Cathvar said, bowing low. "I know this must be frightening for you." Dr. Lisa Grant stepped forward, her scientific curiosity stronger than her fear. "You're beautiful," she said simply. The alien's light patterns shifted to what might have been a smile. "You are kind, but I fear beauty will not save my people." In the briefing room, Cathvar activated a device that filled the air with images. Jake saw worlds he couldn't imagine, cities that floated in clouds, beings of every shape and color living in peace. "This was the Andromeda sector 1 year ago," Cathvar said. 17 different species called it home. We had wars sometimes, but small ones. Trade disputes, border disagreements, nothing that mattered. The images changed. Now Jake saw destruction beyond his worst nightmares. Entire planets stripped down to bare rock. Cities torn apart and fed into massive machines. Millions of beings fleeing in ships that looked ready to fall apart. "The Void Collective came from the dark space between galaxies," Cathvar continued. "Machines with no mercy, no reason we can understand. They consume everything: metal, rock, water, flesh. Nothing is waste to them. Everything becomes part of their fleet." Admiral Knox leaned forward. "How many worlds have they taken?" "All of them," Cathvar whispered. 17 species, countless billions of lives. Only scattered refugees remain, hiding in the empty spaces between stars. Jake studied the images of the machines. They looked like metal insects the size of battleships, all sharp angles and cutting tools. "Why come to us? We've barely left our own solar system." Cathvar's patterns shifted to something like hope mixed with desperation. Because we have heard stories, whispers from traders who venture near your space. They say humans are different, that you fight wars in ways no one else understands, that you never surrender even when surrender would be wise. That's not always a good thing, Lisa said quietly. Perhaps not, Kethvar agreed. But we have tried everything else. Honor, diplomacy, technology, courage. Nothing stops them. We need something different. Something the collective has never faced. President Carter's voice came through the communicator. Ambassador, what exactly are you asking from us? Kethvar turned toward the speaker, his light dimming. I am begging. My people, all the surviving peoples, we offer you everything we have. Our technology, our worlds, our service. We will be your servants forever, if you will help us stop the collective. The room fell silent. Jake could hear the hum of the stations, life support, the distant whisper of cosmic radiation against the hull. Finally, Admiral Knox spoke. How much time do we have? The collective follows our trail. They will be here in 1 month, maybe less. When they come, they will consume your world as they consumed ours. Jake felt cold. So we fight them or we all die? Yes, Kethvar said simply. President Carter's voice returned. Ambassador, we'll need time to discuss this. Can you wait? I will wait as long as you need. But please do not wait too long. The next 3 days were the longest in human history. Every leader on Earth argued about what to do. Some wanted to run, to scatter humanity across space and hope the machines wouldn't follow. Others wanted to fight, but Earth's space fleet was tiny compared to what they faced. General Ryan Brooks was the loudest voice against helping. We have 12 ships, he shouted during one meeting. 12. The alien showed us images of machine fleets that block out stars. This is suicide. But Admiral Knox disagreed. If we run, we're just delaying the inevitable. If we fight and lose, at least we go down swinging. And if we fight and win, we won't win. Brooks interrupted. Not against that. Jake found himself thinking about the old stories his grandfather used to tell. Stories about World War II, when ordinary people faced impossible odds and somehow found a way. But this was different. This was bigger than one world, one species. On the 4th day, President Carter made the announcement that would change everything. Ambassador Kethvar, Earth accepts your request for help, but we're not going to fight this war the way you expect. The alien's relief was visible in the brightening of his crystalline form. Thank you, how can we assist you? Carter smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. Gather all the survivors at the coordinates we'll provide. Get them somewhere safe and wait for us, and Ambassador? Yes? When we arrive, stay out of our way. You asked for our help. You're going to get it. But I don't think you're going to like how we do it. 3 weeks had passed since Earth made its promise to help. Captain Tony Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the UES Valkyrie, watching the massive gathering of refugee ships ahead. Thousands of vessels floated in the darkness, all different shapes and sizes. Some looked like the crystal cathedral ships of the Zephyrians. Others were sleek metal crescents or organic pods that pulsed with their own light. Jesus, whispered his navigation officer, Lieutenant Sam Parker. There must be millions of them out there. Tony nodded. The survivors of 17 civilizations had answered the call. They came hoping to see Earth's mighty fleet, expecting weapons that could challenge the gods themselves. Instead, they got 12 human ships that looked like they were built in someone's backyard. The Valkyrie was the pride of Earth's fleet, but compared to the alien vessels, it looked like scrap metal held together with hope and prayers. Its hull was pocked with rivets and repair patches. The weapons looked crude and simple next to the elegant energy projectors the aliens used. Ambassador Kethvar's ship approached slowly. Tony could see other alien vessels keeping their distance from the human fleet. Word had spread quickly among the refugees. Earth's ships looked primitive, maybe even broken. Captain Rodriguez, came Kethvar's voice over the communicator. We are grateful you have come. Where is the rest of your fleet? Tony smiled grimly. This is it, Ambassador. 12 ships, about 3,000 crew total. The silence stretched long enough that Tony wondered if the communication had cut out. Finally, Kethavar spoke again, his voice careful and polite. "Captain, I think there has been a misunderstanding. The Void Collective has over 10,000 vessels. Some of them are larger than your space stations." "We know," Tony said. "Dr. Kevin Hayes has been studying your battle records for weeks. We know exactly what we're up against." Dr. Hayes stepped forward on the bridge. He was a thin man with tired eyes who had barely slept since the alien data arrived. "Ambassador, can you arrange a meeting with the military leaders of the other species? We need to discuss tactics." 2 hours later, Tony found himself in a conference room filled with beings he couldn't have imagined a month ago. There was General Vorthak of the Stellar Dominion, whose people looked like living metal trees. Commander Zixara of the Crystal Syndicate had a body that seemed to be made of flowing water. At least 20 other species were represented. They all looked at the humans with barely hidden disappointment. Dr. Hayes activated a holographic display. "Before we begin, I need to understand how you've been fighting the collective." General Vorthak's metal branches rustled with what might have been confusion. "Fighting? We engage them in honorable combat as all civilized species do." "Can you be more specific?" Commander Zixara's watery form shifted. "We send formal challenge broadcasts. We arrange our fleets in proper formation. We engage at the designated time and place, following the Galactic War codes." Hayes nodded slowly. "And you always lose." The alien leaders looked at each other uncomfortably. Finally, Vorthak spoke. "The collective is very strong, but they follow no honor. They attack without warning, use unethical tactics, ignore the sacred rules of warfare." "Like what?" Tony asked. "They attack civilian targets. They use captured vessels as weapons. They send false surrender signals. They show no mercy to defeated enemies." Zixara's voice carried deep disgust. "They are savages." Dr. Hayes and Tony exchanged glances. Hayes cleared his throat. "And you've never tried any of these tactics yourselves?" The room erupted in shocked voices. Vorthak's branches turned a darker shade of metal. "Of course not. We are civilized beings. We have honor, codes, traditions that go back millions of years." "Right," Hayes said quietly. "That's what I thought." Hayes activated another display showing tactical formations. "Here's how this is going to work. When the collective arrives, you're going to do exactly what you've always done. Send your challenge, broadcasts, arrange your fleets, follow all your rules." The aliens looked relieved. Maybe the humans understood proper warfare after all. "And what will you do?" asked Kethavar. Tony's smile was cold. "We're going to cheat." The explanation that followed horrified the assembled alien leaders. Hayes described concepts that had no translation in most of their languages. Ambush tactics, psychological warfare, false flag operations, the deliberate targeting of command structures, using the enemy's own rules against them. "This is barbaric," whispered a delegate from the Harmony Collective, a species that looked like living flowers. "You would attack without honor?" "Honor doesn't stop extinction," Tony replied. "You asked us to save you. This is how we do it." Marine Sergeant Carlos Diaz stepped forward. He was a compact, dangerous-looking man with scars on his hands and a cold look in his eyes. "With respect, aliens, you've been fighting a war like it's a game. Rules, codes, honor. The collective doesn't care about your rules. They just want you dead." Diaz activated a training hologram. "Watch this. Your people see an enemy ship. You hail it. Challenge it to combat. Then fight face to face until someone wins or surrenders." The hologram showed a typical alien engagement, formal, structured, almost ritualistic. Here's what humans do. The hologram changed. Now it showed human ships hiding behind asteroids, waiting. When the enemy appeared, they attacked from 6 directions at once, targeting engines and communications first. No warning, no challenge, no mercy. The aliens recoiled in horror. "You attack from behind cover?" gasped Vorthak. "Why would we stand? In the open when we can hide?" Diaz asked. "But the honor of single combat gets you killed." Diaz's voice was flat. "Look, We didn't make the universe. We just learned how to survive in it. Commander Zixara's form rippled with distress. How do you live with yourselves? How do you sleep at night knowing you fight without honor? Tony felt old suddenly. Because while we're sleeping, our families are still alive. Over the next several hours, Dr. Hayes explained humanity's plan. The refugees would do exactly what they always did, drawing the collective into a traditional engagement. The human fleet would scatter, appearing to flee in cowardice. The aliens would be left to face the collective alone. You're abandoning us? Cathvar's light patterns flickered with betrayal. No, Hayes said. We're setting a trap. The collective expects you to fight like you always have. They don't expect us at all. Lieutenant Colonel Amy Foster took over the briefing. She was a small woman with steel in her voice. The collective has been fighting civilized species for so long, they've forgotten that not everyone is civilized. When they come here, they're going to learn what humans do to things that threaten our friends. The aliens didn't understand. How could fleeing be a tactic? How could abandonment be help? Their questions came in a dozen languages, but the humans had no more answers to give. As the meeting broke up, Cathavar approached Tony privately. Captain, I must ask, are you certain this will work? Tony looked out at the refugee fleet, millions of beings who had already lost everything once. Ambassador, I'm not certain of anything, but I know this. Your way didn't work. Their way didn't work. Nobody's way has worked, so we're going to try our way. And if you fail, then we all die together. But if we succeed, Tony's expression was grim. You might wish we had failed. The next day, long-range sensors detected the approaching collective fleet. They came like a plague of metal locusts, thousands of ships moving in perfect formation. At their head was a vessel the size of a small moon, bristling with weapons that could crack planets. The human fleet began to scatter immediately, seemingly fleeing in panic. The alien refugees watched in horror as their promised saviors abandoned them. Some tried to follow, but the humans were too fast, disappearing into the asteroid fields and gas clouds of the outer system. Cathavar broadcast on all frequencies. Humans, please, do not leave us. We are not ready to die alone. Captain Rodriguez's voice came back, distant and cold. You're not alone, Ambassador. We're just not where you can see us. When the shooting starts, keep your people away from the collective's command ships. Trust us. As the Void Collective moved into attack formation, following the same patterns they had used to destroy 17 civilizations, they had no idea that humanity had already begun the real war. In the dark spaces between worlds, human ships moved, like ghosts, carrying weapons that had no honor, no mercy, and no intention of fighting fair. The aliens had begged Earth for help. Now they were about to learn that sometimes help comes wearing the face of hell itself. The Void Collective fleet moved through space like death itself. 10,000 ships in perfect formation, their dark hulls drinking in the light of distant stars. At their center, the command vessel Eternal Hunger stretched 3 miles from bow to stern, its surface covered in weapon systems that could turn planets to dust. Overlord Vexthol stood in the command center, his consciousness uploaded into the machine network centuries ago. He had been flesh once, but flesh was weak. Now he was eternal, immortal, and utterly without mercy. Status report. His voice echoed through every ship in the fleet. Refugee fleet detected, came the reply from 1,000 machine minds. 17. Species confirmed. Standard defensive formation. They await formal challenge. Vexthol's mechanical laughter rang across the fleet. How predictable. Send the standard response. We will engage in 12 hours at the designated coordinates. In the refugee fleet, Ambassador Cathavar watched the human ships disappear into the darkness. Around him, the surviving leaders of 17 civilizations prepared for their final battle. Their ships formed neat lines, weapons powered but not yet aimed. Even facing extinction, they would follow the rules. Where are the humans? General, Vorthak's metal branches trembled with fear and anger. They promised to help us. Cathavar stared at the empty space where Earth's fleet had been. I don't know. Perhaps they realized the fight was hopeless. But deep in the asteroid fields, Captain Tony Rodriguez was very much present. The human fleet had split into small groups, each hiding behind rocks and debris. Their ships were dark, engines cold, invisible to the collective's sensors. All units. "This is Valkyrie," Tony whispered into his communicator. "Remember, we wait until they start their formal combat. Then we hit them where they don't expect it." Engineer Beth Clark floated in zero gravity, making final adjustments to the surprises she had planted throughout the system. For 3 weeks, human engineering teams had been busy. Asteroids that looked normal from the outside now contained nuclear charges. Debris fields had been seeded with mines that would only activate when machines passed by. "Clark to Valkyrie," she radioed. "All traps are armed and ready. When they move into position, they're going to have a very bad day." 12 hours later, the formal battle began exactly as it had 1,000 times before. The collective sent their challenge. The refugees accepted. Both fleets moved into position, facing each other across 1,000,000 miles of empty space. Vexthul watched from his command throne, bored by the predictability of it all. "Begin the harvest," he commanded. The collective fleet opened fire with weapons that tore through space itself. The refugee ships returned fire with their own energy beams, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. Within minutes, dozens of alien vessels were breaking apart. "Target their command ships first," Vexthul ordered. "End their leadership and the rest will surrender." That was when the first surprise exploded. The asteroid field between the two fleets suddenly came alive with fire. Rocks that had floated harmlessly for millions of years erupted in nuclear flame. Collective ships focused on the enemy in front of them flew straight into the hidden mines. "What was that?" Vexthul demanded. Before anyone could answer, the second wave of surprises hit. What looked like floating debris suddenly revealed itself to be human fighters, tiny ships that had been hiding among the wreckage. They swarmed over the collective vessels like angry insects targeting sensors and communication arrays. Colonel Steve Walsh led the fighter attack, his small ship dancing between the massive collective vessels. "Remember, people, we're not trying to destroy them. We're trying to make them blind and deaf." The collective tried to swat the human fighters, but their weapons were designed for ship-to-ship combat. The tiny human craft were too small, too fast, too unpredictable. Every time the machines tried to lock onto one, it would disappear behind another ship or into a cloud of debris. "Unknown vessels," Vexthul broadcast. "Identify yourselves and withdraw or be destroyed." Tony Rodriguez answered from the darkness. "This is Captain Rodriguez of Earth. We're not withdrawing, we're just getting started." The third surprise was the worst. Deep inside the collective fleet, captured enemy vessels suddenly turned their weapons on their own ships. But these weren't alien vessels that had been taken. These were collective ships that humans had somehow gotten aboard. Marine Sergeant Carlos Diaz crouched in the corridor of a collective harvester ship, his team moving like shadows through the mechanical corridors. They had been aboard for 6 hours. Ever since the human engineers had figured out how to mimic collective identification codes. "Remember," Diaz whispered to his team, "we're not here to fight their crew. We're here to make their ship think we're part of the fleet." The humans had spent weeks studying captured collective technology. They learned that the machine ships were controlled by central computers that rarely questioned orders from other collective vessels. So the humans simply told the ships to attack each other. "This is Harvester Unit 447. Diaz spoke into the ship's communication system, using the mechanical voice patterns they had learned. "Engine malfunction detected in Destroyer Unit 891. Request immediate assistance." The destroyer moved to help, exactly as programmed. When it got close enough, Diaz triggered the explosives his team had planted throughout the harvester. Both ships vanished in a ball of fire. Across the collective fleet, the same scene played out dozens of times. Human teams aboard captured vessels used the machine's own rigid programming against them. The collective had never faced an enemy that would lie, cheat, and break every rule of warfare. Dr. Rachel Torres broadcast from her position near the edge of the system. She was a specialist in something the aliens had never heard of: psychological warfare. Her message went out on every frequency the collective used. "Attention, collective drones." Her voice was calm and cold. "You think you're machines, but we know better. We know you're slaves. We know your master is afraid. The message shouldn't have mattered to machines, but it did, because the collective wasn't entirely artificial. At its heart was the uploaded consciousness of organic beings, and organic minds could be hurt in ways machines could not. Your overlord hides behind metal and circuits because he's too weak to face death. Rachel continued. He turned you into machines because he was too cowardly to die like a living being should. Inside the command ship, Vexithol felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries. Doubt. How did these humans know about his true nature? How did they know he had once been flesh and blood? The battle that should have been over in minutes stretched into hours. The collective fleet, designed to destroy organized resistance, found itself fighting an enemy that had no organization, no rules, no predictable patterns. Human ships appeared and disappeared like ghosts. They struck from behind, from above, from directions that shouldn't have been possible. They used the collective's own vessels as weapons. They turned the machines against each other with lies and tricks. Status report, Vexthol demanded, his voice no longer calm. 17% casualties, came the reply. Enemy tactics are unpredictable. Recommend immediate withdrawal for tactical analysis. Withdrawal? Vexthol's rage echoed through the fleet. We do not withdraw. We have never withdrawn. But the humans weren't done. Captain Rodriguez had saved the best surprise for last. Hidden throughout the system were communication jammers, devices that could block the collective's ability to coordinate their attacks. All units activate jammers now, Tony commanded. Suddenly, the perfect coordination of the collective fleet fell apart. Ships that had moved as one mind for centuries found themselves alone, cut off from the network that gave them purpose. Some stopped fighting entirely, their programming unable to cope with isolation. Others began firing randomly, no longer able to tell friend from enemy. Ambassador Kethvar watched from his flagship as the impossible happened. The Void Collective, the unstoppable force that had destroyed 17 civilizations, was falling apart. But instead of feeling joy, he felt something cold and terrible growing in his heart. This wasn't war as he understood it. This was something else entirely. The humans weren't just defeating the collective. They were destroying them from the inside out, using their own strengths against them, turning their mechanical perfection into a weakness. My God, whispered General Vorthak. What have we unleashed? As the collective fleet began to retreat for the first time in their existence, Vexthul made direct contact with the human fleet. His voice carried the weight of centuries and the chill of deep space. Human captain, he said, you fight without honor. You break every law of civilized warfare. Tony Rodriguez's reply would be remembered by every species in the galaxy. You're right. We do fight dirty. We cheat, we lie, we break rules. But here's the thing about humans, Overlord. When someone threatens our friends, we don't fight fair. We fight to win. The silence after the battle felt heavier than space itself. Floating among the wreckage of what had once been the unstoppable Void Collective fleet, the survivors tried to understand what they had just witnessed. Half the machine armada was destroyed or disabled. The other half had fled into the dark between stars, something no one thought possible. Admiral Jake Morrison, newly promoted after the victory, stood on the bridge of the Valkyrie and watched the refugee ships maintaining their distance. The aliens were grateful, but they were also afraid. He could see it in the way their vessels kept space between themselves and the human fleet. Sir, reported Communications Officer Beth Martinez, we're receiving surrender signals from 47 collective vessels. They're requesting instructions. Jake nodded grimly. Even in defeat, the machines followed their programming. Put me through to all frequencies. His voice carried across the battlefield to every ship, human and alien alike. Collective vessels, this is Admiral Morrison. You will shut down all weapons and prepare to be boarded. Any ship that resists will be destroyed. Ambassador Kethvar's voice came through the communicator, uncertain and worried. Admiral, what are you planning to do with the captured ships? What we have to do, Jake replied. We're going to finish this. Dr. Patricia Miles was already aboard one of the captured vessels, her team of digital warfare specialists working to crack the collective's computer systems. She was a small woman with sharp eyes who understood machines better than most people understood other people. The ship's central computer was a maze of code and consciousness, layers of artificial intelligence, built on top of something older and darker. Patricia worked carefully, following data streams deeper into the system's core. "Found you," she whispered. At the heart of the machine network was Overlord Vexthul himself. Not just his commands or his influence, but his actual consciousness, uploaded and copied across thousands of vessels. He was everywhere and nowhere, immortal and trapped. "Human," Vexthul's voice spoke directly into Patricia's mind through the computer interface. "You cannot destroy me. I am eternal. I am beyond death." Patricia smiled coldly. "Maybe. But you're not beyond suffering." She activated a program her team had spent weeks preparing. Not a virus designed to destroy, but something much worse. A mirror program that would force Vexthul to experience every death he had caused, every world he had destroyed, every life he had ended. Commander Nicole Barnes led the assault on the collective's main base, a massive space station hidden in the dead system where their war had begun. The station was the size of a small planet, its surface covered in factories that had been converting captured worlds into new ships for centuries. "Remember, people," Nicole spoke to her boarding teams as their ships approached the station. "We're not just here to destroy this place. We're here to free everyone they've captured." The station's defenses were formidable, but they were designed to fight traditional space battles. The human fighters came in low and fast, using the station's own weapons against itself. They targeted power systems and communication arrays, the same tactics that had worked against the fleet. Inside the station, Marine Captain Ryan Torres and his team moved through corridors filled with horrors. Massive chambers where entire populations had been converted into raw materials. Processing centers where the memories and personalities of conquered species were stored like files on a computer. "Jesus Christ," whispered one of his Marines, staring at a wall covered in millions of tiny containers. "Are those mines?" Torres said quietly. "They stored the minds of everyone they killed." The team worked quickly, downloading the stored consciousnesses onto portable drives. Billions of beings who had been thought lost forever were still here, trapped in digital prison. It would take years to figure out how to restore them, but at least now there was hope. At the center of the station, they found Vexthul's original body, or what was left of it. The ancient overlord had been dead for centuries, his corpse kept in a throne room like a shrine to his own ego. Around the room, holographic displays showed the progress of his eternal war. "All those years," Torres said, looking at the withered remains. "All those deaths, and for what? So one dead man could pretend he was still alive." Dr. Patricia Miles finished her work aboard the captured ship. Vexthul's consciousness was now trapped in a digital cage of his own making, forced to experience every moment of pain he had inflicted on others. The overlord who had sought immortality now faced something worse than death: eternal regret. "Please." Vexthul's voice was broken. No longer the cold machine intelligence, but something desperate and afraid. "End this. Let me die." Patricia considered his request. The human response surprised her with its complexity. Part of her wanted to leave him trapped forever, to let him suffer as his victims had suffered. But another part, the part that made her human, felt something like pity for the broken thing he had become. "You have a choice," she said finally. "True death, complete erasure from existence. Or you can help us restore the minds you've stolen. Spend whatever time you have left trying to undo some of the damage you've done." The silence stretched for long minutes. When Vexthul finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of centuries of horror. "I choose death," he whispered. "I have seen what I am, what I have done. I cannot live with this knowledge." Patricia activated the final program. Across the galaxy, every copy of Vexthul's consciousness simply stopped. The overlord who had terrorized 17 civilizations died not in battle, but in sorrow for what he had become. With their master gone, the remaining collective ships shut down one by one, Some were captured and repurposed. Others were dismantled, their materials used to rebuild the worlds they had destroyed. The war that had lasted for decades ended not with a great battle, but with the quiet death of a tyrant who had forgotten how to be alive. The aftermath was stranger than the war itself. The rescued species were grateful, but they looked at humanity with something between awe and terror. The humans had saved them, but they had done it using methods that violated every principle of civilized warfare. Ambassador Kethvar met with Admiral Morrison one last time before the refugee fleets scattered to reclaim their homeworlds. "Admiral," the crystal being said, his light patterns dim with exhaustion, "we owe you everything. Our lives, our futures, our freedom. All of it." Jake nodded. "You don't owe us anything, Ambassador. We did what we had to do." "But the cost," Kethvar continued. "The things you did, the rules you broke, the honors you cast aside. How do you live with yourselves?" Jake was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the stars where new civilizations would grow from the ashes of the old. The same way we always have, by remembering that sometimes the only way to save what's good in the universe is to be willing to do things that aren't good at all. "And if we need your help again?" Jake's smile was tired but genuine. "Then you call us. But next time, don't be surprised when we show up looking like the bad guys. It's not because we want to be. It's because someone has to be, and we'd rather it be us than you." As the human fleet prepared to return to Earth, Dr. Miles sent her final report to Earth Command. The collective was defeated, their victims were being restored, and the galaxy was safe. But the report's last line would be debated by philosophers and historians for generations. Mission accomplished. The galaxy is free. But in saving it, we have revealed a truth about humanity that we may never be able to escape. When the universe needs monsters to fight monsters, it calls on us, and we answer. The refugee ships scattered to their homeworlds, carrying with them stories of the species that fought without honor and won without glory. They would rebuild their civilizations, but they would never forget the humans who had saved them. And in the dark spaces between stars where new threats might someday emerge, humanity waited, ready to answer the call, ready to do whatever was necessary, ready to be the monsters the universe needed, so that others could remain the heroes it deserved. The galaxy was safe. The price of that safety would be debated forever. But for the millions of beings who lived to see another day, the cost had been worth paying. Earth had given them hell. In that hell, they had found salvation.